for so long, quant was a big challenge for me. Your essay is a very personal journey. They just want to get to know you better. Those standard questions were definitely asked. Whatever I prepared helped. Kept a cool head throughout. It worked out. My name is Vishnu Ravi Shankar. I am a corporate lawyer and I've been practicing for around 8 years now, 8.5 years now. Simultaneous to that, concurrent to that, I also am an entrepreneur. I'm a sports entrepreneur. I run a basketball management company for the past 3.5 years now. It's called Pursuit India. Sports has been a passion of mine growing up, and basketball has been especially close to me. After graduating law school in 2011, I worked in law firms for around 3.5 years, including a stint at a firm called Trilegal, which is one of India's top law firms. I quit Trilegal where I was working because I wanted to get the flexibility to do something more than just law. So I wanted to get into the business and see if I can make an impact in the basketball community in India. So I set up an independent law practice so that would facilitate that. I'd get more flexibility in my working hours. And simultaneously, a friend of mine from law school and we started this basketball media platform called Crackverbal. A formal business education would help me in some areas where I feel like I'm lacking myself or I'm unable to. I don't have that knowledge, like say strategy, for example, marketing, growing, creating value in a product. Those kind of aspects. I feel like an MBA would be useful. My younger brother, who is right now doing his MBA in Narsi Monji in Bombay. So he had come to Crack because he was planning to take the GMAT. So he had registered for your course books, right? He recommended Crackverbal to me because that was obviously the first step. Because I didn't have any idea of how to go about it. Like I said, I wasn't even planning to do an MBA. So I had no idea about this whole world and what all it entails. So yeah, and it was a natural choice coming to Crackverbal and starting with the process. And this began sometime, I would say, summer of last year. So initially it was about, taking the time out, and that took some time actually to instill that discipline, to take the time out, at least an hour. It first started out with the classes. I took the weekend classes and I was just doing the homework and that was my only preparation. But then after the classes got over, obviously there was more intense preparation required. At some level, putting your career on a back seat, in a way. I'm not saying that's recommended for everybody, but if you have the flexibility like I do, to sort of put your career, manage things in a certain way that you also give enough time to GMAT, I recommend that you should do that because it's essentially like a 2-3 month time period where you can really, lock in and prepare. Well, for me, being a lawyer and being out of touch with math for so long, quant was a big challenge for me. More than a decade since I've studied mathematics. So that was a big challenge for me, relearning some of those concepts and understanding those things. Verbal was, I think, comparatively a bit easier for me given my legal background. And if I were to tell someone, and I would say that definitely start preparing, give it a good 6 months. Keep periodically taking mock tests. I think that's something which is very important. One you can just take immediately after you finish your Crackverbal classes, just to gauge, how much you've understood and what your level is, and then work off that and try and keep improving it. Maybe take a test every once in 2 weeks, towards the build up towards that, towards the exam. On the exam day is just about, being, calm. Don't get too overly nervous. You always need to understand that this is just a test and not a test of your intelligence or your ability. Sometimes, it's also about that day, how it works out. So even if, something is not working out that day, during the test itself, don't get too overly panicked or anything like that. And that's what I kept a cool head throughout. It worked out. I honestly thought it was not enough. The important thing that I was banking on and which ended up helping me was how I told my story and what I had done. Even if you get a score which is slightly lower than what you were aiming for, just have a look at what your own story is and how you can sell that. If you have a good story to tell, even if say you're 30-40 marks below what your expected score is, I would say don't panic, don't worry about it, and just see how it pans out in the application process. Yeah, it was important for me to. I was anyway planning to get some advice from somebody, and Crackverbal anyway I was familiar with, and since Crackverbal offered these services, I was more than happy to go with them. Research is extremely crucial. Firstly, you need to understand, obviously, with your score and what you're aiming for, what is the geography and what kind of schools you need to shortlist, right? So that was the first step. So I was looking at North America, but a country which was more welcoming in its immigration policy. So Canada was a natural option for me. And after that, then I shortlisted schools in Canada. All 5 of my options were Canada schools, and then went about the process. So somebody who's been through the process and who's actually working there, who's done an MBA himself, can give some really great advice, and he did. For a couple of weeks, I spent time, just on LinkedIn connecting with people, mostly Indians who have done their MBA in Canada and are working there. That really gave me some confidence because, there were people, of course, it's not easy and their journey was difficult, but there are people who have done it. There are people who have come from India, who haven't worked outside India their entire lives, entire careers, worked in India only, done their MBA in Canada and are now working there in good jobs. So that gave me some insight on, firstly, the schools, and also they gave me some insight on the application process. But one thing everybody told me was that your essay is a very personal journey. Your application, what you write in your application is a very personal thing. Nobody can really, they can't give me those kind of tips which will shape my essay, because everything is very personal to that particular candidate. Right? So it was about how I could, tell my story, how well I could tell my story. The first draft that I sent him was, I would say, mostly off, right? In terms of, it was not answering the prompt very well. It's important that you put in the effort first to just see, where you stand, right, in terms of how you want to tell your story. Obviously, the mentor himself digs deeper into your background and asks more questions about, to get a better idea of what you want to say or where you're coming from. I learned along the way about what even I wanted to do. It's a big journey of self-discovery, the application process. Ideally, I would have liked to apply for everything in round 1, and I would recommend that to most people. Just because they see it, that's one of the first few applications that the admissions committee sees. So maybe it's just a slightly better percentage of, getting a call for the interview. Point of the interview is to pick up on those things which you said in your application and expand on that, right? So that's what they also want to know. They want to get to know you better. And that's how I prepared. I wouldn't say that I had the answers to everything that they asked in the interview. Whatever I prepared helped. It was very casual, in the sense that the entire interview was, they just want to get to know you better. Those standard questions were definitely asked. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Walk us through your resume. Tell us a situation of conflict and how you handle that. So all those standard questions were asked, and I had prepared most of the answers. One thing which I probably could have given a better example of was she asked me about how I follow current business news, how I keep up to date with that. So I told her my sources of information, and then I was telling her that I especially focus on sports business news because that's my area of interest. And she asked me about a specific case example from the real world, sports business world, which can be used as a case study at Ivey. So thinking back, I'd have probably given a different answer for that. And there were so many answers in my head, but I came out with something which may not have come out so well. But mostly the other answers I had prepared for and came out very well. And the important thing is they don't try and grill you. At least that's what I faced. Good to get comfortable in the first couple of minutes, and then take a deep breath and don't hesitate to take a minute, ask for a minute or two to answer a question. You can just say, give me a minute to think about that, which is what I did in a couple of questions. So, and in the end, they always ask you about questions that you have for them, right? So important to have some questions in mind for them. Less than 10 days. Yeah, 8 days, I think. They first call you and they tell you that you've been admitted. And then they told me about the scholarship, all of that. They told me about why they wanted, they gave me the admit that, you show a strong sense of drive, you're a good communicator, what you've done with your career is impressive, all that they will tell you. And then they'll send you the email that you've been invited. Right, so for Ivey, there's a scholarship essay. There are 2 application essay questions, and there is a separate scholarship essay question of 500 words. So they will ask you basically to tell why do you think that you should get a scholarship, right? So I spoke about what all I've done in my legal career, in my achievements basically, and the entrepreneurial world, and even what I did in college. So I wrote all of that in the scholarship essay on why I think I deserve a scholarship. And they'll basically ask you, what is your contribution to the community? That's what you need to bring out. In terms of my legal career, my plan is I need to train someone to, sort of transition. And in terms of the business, slowly wind down. And still, in terms of my players that I manage, either identify somebody else who can manage them, or still be connected with at least the top players in a certain way. Even if not directly managing them, at least I can always be a sounding board, because those relationships will continue. I feel like I need to shore up certain things in terms of my general business knowledge, whatever I can before entering into the MBA program, like some basic stuff, especially accounting, economics, few of those things. Also, I'm planning to take up French classes, because in Canada, those are 2 of the major languages, English and French. So I would say, see where you are in your career. There's no harm in taking a GMAT, because that lasts for 5 years anyway. But when you want to apply is, when you feel like that is the actual ideal next step for you. Where you feel like an MBA would really elevate your career and take it to the next level, whether it's a career transition you want, or you want to jump in your career, whatever your objective is, you want to move to another country. Think about all those things first, and then I would say go about the process.